Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at a brand new retro-inspired controller from 8Bitdo. This is their Sn30 Pro Plus, and it's based on a Super Nintendo design, but it adds all of the modern accoutrements, including analog thumbsticks, analog triggers, some nice handles, and a few other features, including some software that you can use to customize everything on the controller. We're going to take a closer look at this controller here in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this came in free of charge from 8Bitdo. However, all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this controller is all about. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This is $49.99 at the time I'm recording this video, and it's kind of the next step up from their regular Pro controller that we looked at about a year ago. This one feels like it's got slightly better sticks here. Everything just feels slightly improved over the original, and this one, of course, adds the handles and the analog sticks to it. There are 3 different colors available too, so this is their Super Nintendo-inspired look. It has the concave Y and X buttons like the North American Super Nintendo console had, and then of course these 2 buttons are more rounded. And then they've got a Game Boy inspired version here that has 4 rounded buttons, and there's also a black version available too, again with those rounded buttons, so you can pick the one that is best suitable to your needs. Now, like other 8Bitdo controllers, these are compatible with a number of different platforms, including the PC. It'll support X input mode, so all of your Windows games should see this exactly like they would an Xbox One controller, for example. That X input compatibility includes direct USB connections, and it also works when you are connected over Bluetooth, so you can use it wirelessly or wired. It also works with the Mac, with Linux, with Android devices like the NVIDIA Shield TV. You can also connect it up to your Raspberry Pi for your RetroPie installations and whatnot. And it's compatible with the Nintendo Switch, both wirelessly and plugged in with a USB cable. And the motion controls work as well. There are vibration motors on the controller that seem to be working across all platforms that support it. The D-pad here feels really nice. It doesn't have much of a deep travel to it, but it feels about what you would remember a Super Nintendo controller feeling like. The big thing that people like me to test on these controllers is the rapid left-right movement to make sure that we don't get any inadvertent diagonals. I tested that out on my Nintendo emulator a little bit earlier. That seemed to work just fine, and that was something that we noticed was an issue in prior versions of 8Bitdo controllers, but it has been corrected on this one because we had no errant diagonals as I was playing around with it. The analog sticks here feel a little bit better to me. They feel more sensitive. And you'll see when we do some of the customization what kind of sensitivity they have and how you can adjust that. Everything else here feels great. And what's nice about this on the Switch is that you can play Tetris 99 because it does have a very functional D-pad, unlike the dysfunctional D-pad on the actual Nintendo first-party controller. And of course, you got to play Tetris 99 with that D-pad. It really makes a difference for me, at least. Now, a big change on this new controller is the fact that you can take out the rechargeable battery. There's a battery cover here that just lifts off like you would see on an Xbox controller. And the battery itself, people tell me, looks a lot like the rechargeable battery for the Xbox One. I don't know if it's compatible with that, so I would not try to put in the Xbox battery into your 8Bitdo controller or vice versa, but you have the option here. This should be good for about 20 hours or so of gameplay. My experience with these things has been that they typically last a very long time, and I'm often just popping my controller on the charger after a day or two anyhow. Now, when you take it out, you also have the option now to use AA's instead. So if you have rechargeable AA batteries or just regular alkalines, you can pop them in here and use them to keep on playing should that battery ever die on you in the middle of a session. So there's some flexibility there. I would love to see them now introduce a version of this with the battery pack as an option, which I think would bring the price down maybe a little bit. So that's something maybe they can look at in the near future. Let's take a look now at their configuration software and see all the different things you can do to get the controller working the way you want. So the big change here on the Sn30 Pro Plus is that it works with 8Bitdo's new Ultimate software. This software only runs on Windows at the moment. And when you connect up the controller via USB, you can configure every inch of this thing to do what you want with it. So for example here, when we plug it in, you can see that it brings us to mapping first. And what we can do here is map buttons to different commands, So right now, for example, the L2 button is mapped to L2, but I could maybe have it go to R2 if I wanted to. Basically, anything you can think of, you can configure on here, and this might be useful if there are games that you want to do specific things with that don't often give you the options in-game. Right now it's set to the X input mode, but there's also a switch mode, so these mappings can be done on the Switch as well as on your Windows games. You also have the option to save profiles, so after you set up everything, you can save the profile, and all of these settings will be easily restorable when you go back in later. Just know, though, that to set profiles, you do have to connect the controller every time to the computer. It won't store more than one at a time. Now, if we jump over here to sticks, you can see here that we've got this little tester here with the stick, and I can move things around here and just see what my sensitivity is set to. And I have the option to set the dead zone of it. So for example, if the left stick is feeling a little bit too sensitive, I can just grab this end here, and you can see that gray area starting to build out from the center. And then if I move the controller within that section there, it won't register anything until I go out to here. So you can see how that works. And you can also reduce the other side of the equation here too, and have a very narrow section here as to where that controller kicks in. This works on both the Switch and on Windows, and I tested it a little bit earlier and it seems to be working. So that is a pretty cool thing, especially if you want more precise control as to how these sticks work. And you can control them each independently. You can also invert them, and you can swap them as well. And again, that all saves to the profile that you have in there. Likewise, you have similar controls here on the triggers. So as I pull the trigger down here, you can see right now we're going at the full range, but I could set a dead zone or an inactive area on this one as well. And if I push it down into that area, nothing happens until I get past it there. So that's pretty cool to have that level of control as well. Here you can also swap the triggers and, of course, control them independently. There's also a vibration mode here where you can set the intensity of the vibration. I found that the left motor is a little bit stronger than the right motor, but I think that's the case on the Xbox controllers too. So if this is just rocking your hand a little too much, you can turn it down a little bit and get it to where you want it to be. And then the last section here is the macro section. So if you have a game where you maybe want to repeat a process every time you push a button, what I could do here is hit the plus button here and say every time I push down the right one button, I want to hit A, and then I can hit add. And I could even do a combination of A and B together. And if I click add after doing that, it'll execute both of those at the same time. So you have some degree of combinations that you can put to bear here on this. I would have liked to have seen some keyboard inputs and some other things like you might get on a gaming mouse, but there's pretty cool stuff in here that you can configure, especially for the kinds of games where you want to repeat a process over and over again when you push a specific button. And this might be a really good use for one of these two buttons down here, which aren't always used on the PC or even on the Switch if you maybe wanted to get rid of the snapshot button and add some kind of macro for a game that you're playing. And then, of course, when you have everything configured, you can save it and off you go. All right, so let's take a look now at a real-world application. I have my Nintendo Switch hooked up, and we've got the controller paired up via Bluetooth. I did two things to configure this controller. The first is I set a custom dead zone on the left stick, but not the right stick. And I also set up a macro to execute two button pushes together. So let's take a look at the dead zone first. So this left stick here has that custom dead zone put into place. And as I start moving it here, you can see Mario is not moving until I get it past the point in which the dead zone was configured. And then he'll start going there. So that seems to be working properly. To tweak this, though, you're not going to be able to do it in real time. You'll have to plug it into the computer, set the settings, and then reconnect to the Switch and see how they work out for you. So it's not an immediate thing, and you won't be able to see on screen the results of what you're doing until you repair it with the Switch. So it might be a little bit of back and forth while you get it set up initially. Now on the right stick here, we don't have a dead zone set at all. But you can see you do have to move it a little bit even with no dead zone configured before the Switch starts registering things. And I'm guessing that because it's tricking the Switch into thinking that this is a Pro controller, whatever Nintendo has configured for its controller is what is applying here by default. So whatever dead zone is set by the console will still be there. So just keep that in mind. Now on the macro, it seems to work pretty well. Now, what I'm going to do here is just jump, and then if I jump again and then push the X button, he can throw his hat while in the air. and I configured the start button here to do both of those things. So you can see he jumps and then throws the hat, but he's not jumping all that high, and the reason is that I could not figure out a way to insert a pause after the jump button is pushed inside of that macro. So the macro is working, which is great to see on the Switch here, but it is not working in the sense that I can't really time out the macro to have him jump a little bit before he tosses the hat. So it'd be nice for them to add in a pause function, for example, to make that work a little bit better. But the motion controls work, so if I just push up on or move the controller up like this, you can see he throws the hat up in the air. If I do a little boomerang toss here, he'll have a different move. So it appears that all of the motion controls are working properly on this controller with the Switch, and that's something that 8Bitdo has been able to do on prior versions of their Pro controllers as well. So let's move on now to my lag and latency testing. In other words, how long does it take for a button push to register on screen? Now, the way we test things is that we hook the controller first up to a PC via USB. That PC is in turn connected to a gaming monitor, and we're running at 144 Hertz. We then take out my iPhone and shoot the controller button and the screen at 240 frames per second, and we see how long it takes for a button push to register in my game controller tester that's running on that computer. And what we do is we look at the differences between various controllers that we test to see what the variations are between different types of controllers with the exact same setup. Your setup will vary because you're going to have a different computer and a different monitor, and every component along the way here will introduce different levels of lag. But what you're seeing here is what my real-world experience is, and it'll give you some ideas to what you can expect. So on the PC, connected via USB, we had a 44 millisecond lag between a button push and that push registering in the controller tester. That is exactly the same as my Xbox One controller when it's connected up via USB, which, by the way, is the best controller I have tested in this configuration. So on USB, I think it's probably the ideal way to use this. It'll probably be imperceptible between this and the Xbox controller, which is great. Now, we also connected it up via Bluetooth to that same computer. That added about 20 milliseconds of lag, about 64 milliseconds. Still very good and on par with what I've seen out of the best controllers that I have tested. Note, though, that when you are connecting wirelessly, different Bluetooth configurations are going to introduce different amounts of lag. The computer we're testing with is an Alienware gaming laptop where that Bluetooth radio is probably tuned for gaming and minimal lag, so you might see a little bit of a variation on that test between devices. Now, we also tried it out with the Nintendo Switch, and we connected it via Bluetooth to the Switch, and we tested the screen on the Switch itself just to have some consistency between different Switch devices that were out there. There we got a score of 84 milliseconds, which is not as good as the regular Switch controller, which comes in around 64 milliseconds or so, but still I think very good and probably hard to tell the difference between the Pro controller and this one. But if you are very sensitive to lag, the actual Pro controller from Nintendo will do a little better than this one, and that's been our experience across the board for the most part with these third-party controllers connecting up to the Switch via Bluetooth. So overall, I'm quite pleased with what 8Bitdo has put together here. It's been fun to watch their development over the years because they kind of started making just replica Super Nintendo and Nintendo controllers. They were good products, they had good compatibility, there were a couple of gotchas here and there. They corrected all of those, and this controller is kind of the culmination of everything they've learned from us customers over the years. So what's nice about this is that you have that familiar Super Nintendo look and feel, but you also get all the modern comforts of analog triggers and analog sticks that are very precise and improved over prior iterations, a great D-pad. Everything just works here, and I really like the addition of the customization software. Even though I would like to see a few more options on the macro side, I think it's a very nice improvement and something that customers have been asking for over the years, and it's clearly the best controller that they've ever put together here, and it's still priced, I think, at a very reasonable price, especially given all the things you can do with it and the very broad compatibility across many different platforms. So I think this one's a winner. I've always liked what they've done, but they keep getting better, and this is certainly the best of the bunch here. So check it out. Any comments you have, let me know down in the comments below. I'll try to do a follow-up maybe on my weekly wrap-up video on the weight with the phone attached. I'll try to get that bracket in. Anything else you'd like to see, add that down to the comments there, and we'll try to lump a few questions together and get all the answers to you. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the 4 Guys with Quarters podcast, emudev.org, Tom Albrecht, Brian Parker, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.